So I've been testing a lot of leveling methods for the Rogue specifically because as of right now, I will be playing Rogue on Season 1 launch. And I want to share a step-by-step process during portions of the leveling process that you can follow starting Season 1. There might be some changes as we get more information, but better we start getting all these things kind of organized, at least the better it is for me. Let's dive into it. So the first thing we need to do is get a build. Now, I'm not going to spend a ton of time on this build for this video because there might be some minor modifications that we make due to the patch coming on the 18th. However, what I do know is that this build was exceptional for leveling on the Rogue for maximum damage. You might notice that I also only have one aspect, and that is because this build truly only needs the Blade Dancers aspect to absolutely crush, and also it will go ahead and help you speed up everything because you only need to get one aspect for the build to be basically completely finished. Pretty simple stuff. Twisting Blades Rogue has always been extremely quick. You're also going to take benefit out of Shadow Step and Dash, allowing you to move through everything very quickly because, again, we are starting the season with 5 skill points immediately, assuming you've already done your altars and your skill point grabbing, which is finishing the renown, right, and getting your map completion. Then you're going to be blasting. So we really only care about speed, speed, speed. Then we dive into the initial 1 to 17 process, and we really want to level quickly, and we don't really care about going around the map getting all the additional renown. If that is something that you do care about, well then, go ahead and do that, but it's going to be a lot slower for your early leveling process. And once you start diving into nightmare dungeons, you can actually go up and pick a lot of the strongholds up that you didn't before and potentially do nightmare dungeons to finish off the renown to get your last 5 skill points, which means in the 1 to 17 process, we want to reach level 17 as quick as possible so we can unlock our second leveling method. And 1 to 17 is going to be filled with running the bottom right hand side of Fractured Peaks. There is the, I guess you could say, the ghoul route. That is kind of the route, I guess that's a proper name for it because it's majority ghouls, and this gives incredible XP. Now, it is an open world area, but along the route there are little dungeons off to the side, as you can see as I am showing you here. And it's going to be really solid XP. There's also an event off to the side, and you'll pick up that every single time, and you'll just reset that. I prefer to do this on World Tier 2 because we will, as I mentioned earlier, get those 5 skill points and have all of our altar bonuses. So getting 1 to 17 on World Tier 2 is actually be slightly faster than World Tier 1 based on my testing. Now, nearing the end, approaching the end of level 16, as you're getting close to 17, you're going to need 2 things, okay? 1, your rogue specialization, and 2, the actual aspect that's going to go on your weapon. So as you get close to finishing off level 16, maybe around like halfway, then you're going to head over and do the rogue specialization quest and actually do the dungeon in Skosglen for your Blade Dancers aspect. Pretty simple. As soon as we reach level 17, we're going to move on over to our next leveling method. So now that we're hitting level 17, we've gotten our rogue specialization, we've gotten our aspect unlocked. Be sure to apply that to our 2-handed crossbow. We're going to be moving over to our next leveling method, and that is Champion's Demise. Now, this is something that a lot of people have already run. If you can run it in a group, great. If you cannot, don't worry. This is all meant to be done solo, and I have done it solo. Well, we're going to be running Champion's Demise up until level 27, until we unlock our next method. There are some other ways that you could get similar XP while running all the different strongholds, but either A, that's going to be really complicated for you to remember which ones to run at which specific time. B, you're going to have a lot more time in between certain areas traveling. And C, it's much easier and more relaxing to just simply run the same dungeon over and over and over again. Granted, if that's not something you want to do, don't worry, but it's going to make your whole leveling process more consistent and easier. And on average, I've found this to be the best way to go ahead and level all the way to 27. If you're struggling a little bit through these dungeons, well, you might want to start actually clearing Champion's Demise. Before we, let's say, finish the dungeon, we actually don't want to finish the dungeon. You don't want to move the little stones to the middle platforms. You just want to clear out all 3 lanes, leave the dungeon, and leave the game, and then join the game again and enter the dungeon. That's going to reset it. But if you're running low on gear, or potentially you want some upgrades, clearing the entire dungeon is actually not a bad way to get some upgrades, because the bosses tend to drop a little bit more rare items, which can help you get a couple of upgrades on your way to level 27. But now we've reached level 27, and this is where it gets really, really fun, because we're going to be heading over to Temple of Rot. Temple of Rot is going to be the absolute best XP per minute as we approach level or World Tier 3 and World Tier 4. Once you unlock World Tier 3 and World Tier 4, there potentially are some better options. Or you could run like Helltide zones for gear upgrades, etc. But until then, we kind of have the only options available to us right now are dungeons and strongholds. So continuously running Stronghold of Rot is going to be exceptionally good XP. Now, with this stronghold, it can be a little tricky starting out. So you do want to make sure you're prioritizing some really solid gear in terms of making sure you're filtering out your rares, making sure you have that aspect equipped. And if you do drop any legendaries that give you good aspects, you might want to equip those as well. Make sure to consistently upgrade your gear to make sure you're actually strong enough to clear these things. And of course, before you finish the stronghold, as you approach nearing the end of it, you're going to go ahead and reset it. And you could see an example of the clear here on screen. You're going to run through the entire stronghold up until you reach these pack of 3 elites. Once you kill those, you're going to finish the stronghold and move on to the next one. You're going to be doing this all the way to level 40, assuming you're able to beat the World Tier 3 Capstone Dungeon at level 40. If you are not able to, then you're going to want to continue to do Stronghold of Rot until you can beat the World Tier 3 Capstone Dungeon. And now we enter World Tier 3. Again, if you can't do it at 40, then you can go ahead and wait. But once we enter World Tier 3, you have a few things to consider. First off, we're going to be running Nightmare Dungeons as our main source of XP for the entirety of World Tier 3, all the way up until 60. At 60, you can equip Ancestral Gear, which means that you're going to want to enter World Tier 4 at 60. Before that, unless you have a really solid build and you have some really solid gear, you're probably going to struggle too much in World Tier 4 to make the XP worth it. A couple things about World Tier 3, though, and Nightmare Dungeons. During this time, you might want to consider completing a few of the strongholds that a couple of the Nightmare Dungeons are in, because when you teleport to them, they're going to be prevented from being able to be teleported to, because you cannot do them because you have not finished that stronghold. But generally speaking, I just avoided those and then just continue to teleport across the map, because you do not need to unlock any of the waypoints. You can just immediately teleport to that Nightmare Dungeon despite not being anywhere near them. So this is actually a really, really good way to potentially unlock some of those waypoints if you wish, which can be a nice way to kind of finish off the map while you're leveling instead of doing it earlier on. Of course, in order to do Nightmare Dungeons, you need to get your first Nightmare Sigil. And the best way to do that is to go ahead and complete a round of the Tree of Whispers. It's going to give you usually 1 Nightmare Sigil, so you can go ahead and start your Nightmare Dungeon farming as soon as you enter World Tier 3. Also, another consideration is that you do unlock Helltide zones when you do get World Tier 3, and if you wish, you can go ahead and do those for potentially a little bit extra upgrades. And you also want to consider what build you're running at this point, because we do unlock Paragon points during this time. And so with the new Season 1 patch notes, we will see more updated ladder game or end game builds, because I think the leveling process is going to remain roughly the same in terms of the builds, but the end game builds are going to be vastly different. As of recording this video, my 2 best recommendations for speed clearing and speed farming are going to be Trapper Rogue, Death Trap Twisting Blades, and Poison Imbuement Twisting Blades Rogue. Those are the 2 best speed farmers that I've found so far. But then we enter World Tier 4. And guess what, guys? World Tier 4 isn't really all that different from World Tier 3. As I mentioned earlier, you might want to do some Helltide zones in World Tier 4 to go ahead and actually get those high tier upgrades, because World Tier 4 is going to get a lot harder from World Tier 3, usually. But we're just going to be running Nightmare Dungeons 3 above us for the remainder of our leveling process, all the way to level 100, with one exception. When we enter World Tier 4, we actually might want to interact with the new seasonal mechanics. So if you wish to go ahead and pick up, and these mechanics are super strong, we can go ahead and farm these specific areas that these things drop to add them to our jewelry here. Now, if they're pretty weak, or if they're not core to our builds, then I would just recommend blasting to 100 before you even attempt to farm it, because they did mention that they will scale throughout the game. Although I think World Tier 4, similar to other pieces of gear in the game, are going to be kind of the maximum cap of item power. So that's why I recommend farming the unique season areas at World Tier 4. Now, this is pretty much the remainder of your gameplay experience. Just running Nightmare Dungeons, min-maxing your build, enchanting your gear, and the normal progression tips as we normally go through. Hopefully this was helpful. If it was, leave a like in the video, sub to the channel, guys. And I will have an updated Season 1 starter build list for the Rogue, as well as all classes, and a bunch of other videos to talk about Season 1 coming soon. So I'll see you then.